how to be more self-aware, or how to be more aware of yourself. Maybe you find yourself sometimes overreacting, or just reacting, or getting angry, or getting frustrated, or having any emotions that is not preferred. And you wonder, how can you be reacting in a better way? How can you be more aware of yourself? So in these situations, and let's face it, often, always, they are very unexpected when something triggers us. How can we just be more conscious and self-aware? So the self-identity, the self-image can never really be aware of reality. It doesn't notice it lives in an imagined story, and it simply doesn't know what reality is. So what does that mean? It means that who is even asking this question, how to be more aware, other than the self-identity itself? And so when the self-identity tries to be more aware of itself, and notice that I really use the word trying, it's an effort connected to that. Everything it does is very mental, and the core quality is always effort. It's trying. And so it's trying to be more conscious, but what it looks like, it's trying to figure things out. It overthinks, it rehearses conversation, it constantly tries to analyze other people. Also, it's trying to analyze itself. But the whole purpose of this whole show is simply just so it can control situations, and it can control other people, and it can control its own behavior. And of course, this can never be achieved because life is completely uncontrollable. We simply never know what is going to happen next. It's like sometimes you really think you know something will happen, but then it happens in a completely different way. Or you think people will react in a certain way when you tell them something, but they don't. And when they do, the ego, the self-identity, feels very righteous, like, oh, I knew it. And it just strengthens that it's very good and that it's aware. And so it's a very contracting experience, because the self-identity has to be thinking about everybody, including itself, and past images of itself, including the future images of itself, to be self-aware. However, the self-identity, the roles that we identify with, it's completely disconnected from reality. It lives in duality. And duality is a story. It has a past, it has a future. And there is a purpose of every story. So the self-identity always has a purpose. And the purpose is to survive. And so it tries to achieve it by controlling everything. And I'm not really talking about the physical survival. This is about the symbolic survival. It tries to look like a good person, in a nutshell. And so even though sometimes it can appear that it is very self-aware, what does that even mean? When I speak to my clients, sometimes they tell me that they are very self-aware. And once we start looking underneath, there is just so much that they never considered. Entire world of blind spots, entire universe that they never explored. It's an entire dream that they never explored until they asked themselves really good questions. And so today I'm going to share with you this one question that exposes the entire dream. And we're going to look at it closely because this is such a great question to actually be more self-aware in any situation. And especially those situations that are triggering. There is a contraction, we feel stressed, anxious. And so we try to figure it out in our heads, we think about it, or we avoid, and we do something else to distract ourselves from those painful thoughts. And the path to self-awareness is exactly through those painful thoughts. So the more we try to avoid them, the more we're losing the opportunity to be self-aware. And so the question, which is very powerful and very simple as well, is what do I must believe to feel this way? So for example, you're at a meeting, you have an important presentation and you're sweating, or you just can't stop eating the cookies and you have the knot in your belly, you feel nervous. And so when you ask yourself that question, what you must believe, and not just asking really quickly just to try to figure it out, but really having that stillness and look underneath to see the beliefs that are running the show. Because we simply reacting to that story. It has nothing to do with reality. It has nothing to do with that meeting or with that presentation. And so we may notice that we feel the way we feel because maybe we believe that we can make a mistake, or that people will judge us, or maybe we are not good enough. My recent client, he was doing a similar presentation and he was in a room full of people who had PhDs and he didn't. So he felt incompetent. He believed he is not competent and he felt so much anxiety a week before this presentation even happened. And he didn't know where was it coming from, because normally he was just okay giving presentation and giving jokes. And so when we ask this question, we notice that underlying story. And the reason why it is a story, it really stretches across time. And this time only exists in a thought. It's a dream. It has nothing to do with reality, with what is. So, but we cannot help but mistake it for reality. That's why it creates all these bodily sensations. And often we believe 100% beyond shadow of doubt that it's true. And the more we believe it, the more we feel all the sensations. And what's worst about this is that the story really stretches all the way to the future. It goes all the way from the past, from the very first moment when you experienced a similar situation. And when I say you, I'm talking about that self-identity, the character that lives in that story. It is not real. It is a story. But we mistake it for reality because it's so convincing. It comes with thoughts, images. And so the whole story begins in the past when we felt unsafe, or somebody told us something that didn't feel safe, or that we got hurt. And it stretches all the way into the future. And so if you really want to be more self-aware, simply look at this whole story. And this whole story stretches. I'm looking over there as if the story was like going all the way there. But for most people, it's the past is, for you, it's there. The future is over there. It happens in the mind. When you study body language, nobody talks about it, but the way we move our eyes when we're thinking about something, when we're remembering something, we're actually looking at those images that obviously don't exist, but we don't notice. They are just so convincing that we mistake them for reality and we react to them. So there's a whole bunch of stories or judgments, what I believe about myself, what I believe about others. And none of that is true. It's just a very convincing movie. And in my online course, we look deeply into the story of anxiety. And those anxious thoughts, they are particularly interesting because anxiety is always showing us the future images about what will happen. And it's not like what might happen. It's really what will happen. Like, it shows these images that we don't notice it, but it's already showing us the different scenarios, what will happen. And then not only like what will happen to us next, but then what will happen to us after that, and after that, and after that, until all the way to the end, to the very end of our personal story, which is the imaginary deadline, death. And so with this example of the presentation, when I believe that I'm not competent, I'm already feeling so much stress in that moment. And I see myself in the future where I get ostracized. Maybe people gossip about me. Maybe I stumble with my speaking. Those images are not real, but I react to that. I'm already feeling how I imagine will be feeling. And so I cannot be present in that meeting. I cannot be present in that presentation because I'm trying to manage my stress and my anxiety with different techniques, focusing, rehearsing, thinking about it a week before even the presentation happened. And the stronger the story is, the stronger the images are, the more anxiety I feel. The more convincing they are, the more anxiety I feel. And then, of course, then is consequences after that, where I imagine what will happen after that. So maybe I will get fired. So I feel already that anxiety from that scenario. And it's completely unnoticed. It's completely hidden from awareness unless we start looking. And if you're really serious about being more self-aware, there is really nothing more valuable than looking into that entire story to see what's underneath, why you're reacting to people or situations the way you do, because none of that is your fault. It's not your fault that these images simply appear. It's not your fault that these stories appear. It has nothing to do with you. But if you are curious, then taking my online course, or at least trying the free lessons, it's just a natural next step, because it will show you and teach you exactly how to look at those stories and how to dissolve the entire story, not just one part of it, not just that anxiety I feel in the moment, because the anxiety is never created by the moment. It's never created by now. It's always created by what I imagine, what it would mean about me. And so in that presentation, I might imagine that I will get fired. And I imagine the days when I will be just home alone with less money, trying to find a new job. And it feels so stressful. And maybe at the end, I will not find that job, and I will need the money, and I will end up on the street, and I will die alone. And this is not exaggeration. This is what the mind does. It shows us these scenarios, but we are completely not aware. We're just reacting to it. And the more convincing they are, I already said that, the more we react. So sometimes we feel a little bit of anxiety. And sometimes we feel so much that it's a full-blown panic attack. And we don't understand why some people feel in a certain way. We don't understand why people overreact, because we don't know what they imagine, what it means about them. We don't know why some people are so scared of driving, for example. We just look at them as something's wrong with them. I know there's a lot of people, including myself, actually, at some point in my life, where I was so scared to merge on a highway, going from the side road, like just merging on the highway. That was so scary for me. And I remember telling me just, oh, this is so easy. You just do it. You just merge. There's nothing scary about it. And I couldn't help it. And so until I looked and the images were there, the story was there, I saw myself crushing and hurting myself. And so if you have a story like that, that's hidden, insidiously hidden, of course you're going to be reacting to it, because you try to protect yourself from that imaginary danger. And it feels not only uncomfortable, it takes a lot of effort to manage. And so we try to manage our emotions. We try to manage our anxiety, manage our stress by different things, by reading self-help, breathing techniques, meditation, all kinds of stuff. But unless we really look at the stories that the self-identity thrives in, it simply doesn't matter what we do. It will never be enough, and it will never be permanent. Just one thought can change completely the whole setup. I can feel so happy one day, and just one image about me losing something dear to me, and if it's convincing enough, or someone says something to me, and there's an image and a story just appears out of nowhere. It's like a ghost. It is the dream. It is the duality. And so there is a way to jump out of that duality. And it begins by noticing. Because once we start noticing that story, and also the one who lives in that story, and we see that it is not us, it is just an image in mind, a very convincing image with a very convincing story. And the lines of that story, those are your thoughts. I say your thoughts, obviously they're not yours. They just appear for nobody in particular, but we mistake them for my thoughts. They feel so private. And so there is a lot of things that we do to manage the sensations that are uncomfortable. But it doesn't matter how much we manage those sensations, because we are still trying to protect ourselves from an imaginary threat. But we believe it 100% that it's true. It's always about the future. It's never about now. Now doesn't create any tension. All the tension and contraction or stress in the body is simply created by a story. And we react in the way, always try to control everybody, including ourselves. We try to be more self-aware. More conscious. We try to preserve looking good in front of others. And all this effort, all of this trying, is only disconnecting us from authenticity and from just being. Because being doesn't need any effort. It doesn't need to think about it, how to be. Being doesn't need to figure out how to be. Being doesn't need to figure out how to be more aware of itself. It is simply noticed what's in the way of being, which is that simple question, what do I must believe to feel that way? It uncovers the entire universe of so many fears and expectations. Basically, all of these painful thoughts that we're trying to run away from. But by running away from them, we are staying in that duality, enduring situations, relationships, staying in soul-crashing jobs, and trying to justify it by excuses why we must stay there and why can't we go anywhere else. We don't know that we are under the influence of a story. But you are not the character you mistake yourself for. The role in that story is played only until it's disbelieved, until it is realized what its purpose, what it's really protecting, and that protection simply doesn't work anymore. Until you see clearly what is it really costing you in your life, and without all these stories, it's just so simple. There is just clarity, openness, patience, love. It's so beautiful that just thinking, well, it's so beautiful. And it's so available. It is not out of reach. It is just covered up by really good, convincing stories. What if all of your anxious thoughts were just one big excuse to play it safe? Stop hiding. Step out of mediocrity and stagnation and discover authentic momentum.